And all these other holidays. Let's talk about the other holidays. When we hear happy holidays, what are people being PC about? One that I see because I live in Atlanta, and just the demographics here, the TV stations all like to wish us a happy Kwanzaa. Now, I won't go into what Kwanzaa is. You can Google it and Wikipedia it yourself. But I'll tell you it's made up. It is not a religious holiday at all. It was flat out made up by some guy. It's on the level with Scientology as far as being completely made up. Atheism, these atheist people, they like to say, oh, we're celebrating the solstice. Atheism is made up. It's made up. Atheism is not true. Somebody sat around one day and said, why don't I just say there's no God? There's so obviously a God. Atheism is as made up as Kwanzaa. So, if they're offended by Merry Christmas, then they probably are. But people who celebrate Kwanzaa and the solstice and are atheists buy Christmas presents too. Can't offend them. Now let's talk about Hanukkah. Now I'm going to make a little suggestion. Why don't we as Christians get on board a little bit with Hanukkah? Because we all know about the menorah and the candles, but what does that represent? Well, I'll give you a little short story, and again, you can look up Hanukkah, or if you know a Jewish person, ask them to explain it to you. Israel, after the fall into Babylonian hands, was pretty much under foreign rule and occupation, even through to the time of Jesus. Pretty much until 1946, or whenever it was that Israel was founded, they were under some kind of subjugation to other powers. Except for the time around Hanukkah, when a man named Judas Maccabeus rose up to take Israel back. Now, at the time that Judas was fighting his oppressors, the temple was being defamed, or profaned. I'm sorry, I'm slow today. And Judaism as a practice was being outlawed. Now the Jews took the temple back over. And here the Jews have won this victory to take the temple back over. And they had to have a ceremony to cleanse the temple. And they burned candles in the temple. And at that time you used oil. Well, here was the story. The candles in the temple are supposed to be burned constantly, like an eternal flame, But there was only enough oil for one day. Well, miraculously, that oil lasted 8 days until they could get some more oil in there. Now, that's not too hard to believe. This is God's temple we're talking about. This is the very same temple Jesus went to and threw out the money changers. Worship of God, the God of the universe, was going on through this temple. Now, is it too silly to think that the God of the universe can't give these people some oil to last longer? Hanukkah is a celebration of the provision of God. And I don't think there's anything unchristian about celebrating the provision of God. There's something unchristian about not affirming Jesus, which many people who celebrate Hanukkah do not affirm Jesus. But even as Christians, we can look into the Old Testament and see the story of Elisha and the widow. That's in 2 Kings chapter 4, and I'll read it to you. Elisha, not Elijah. Elisha, the prophet after Elijah, helping a widow. We'll start right into the story. Now a certain woman of the wives of the sons of the prophets cried out to Elisha, "Your servant, my husband, is dead, and you know that your servant feared the Lord. And the creditor has come to take my 2 children to be his slaves." Elisha said to her, "What shall I do for you? Tell me, what do you have in the house?" And she said, "Your maidservant has nothing in the house except for a jar of oil." Then he said, "Go, borrow vessels at large for yourself from all your neighbors, even empty vessels. Do not get a few. And you shall go and shut the door behind you and your sons, and pour out into all these vessels, and shall set aside what is full." And she went from him and shut the door behind her and her sons. They were bringing the vessels to her, and she poured. When the vessels were full, she said to her son, "Bring me another vessel." And he said to her, "There is not one vessel more." And the oil stopped. Then she came and told the man of God, and he said, "Go, sell the oil and pay your debt, and you and your sons can live on the rest." So let's draw that in. Elisha's a prophet in the northern kingdom. Read the Bible. Things were really bad in the northern kingdom of Israel for the widows and the fatherless. And here we have a woman, her husband was a servant, friend of Elijah, and he's died. They didn't have Social Security or death benefits and pensions back in those days. You were pretty much up the creek if your husband died and you had kids. So this woman is in desperate need. Her children are about to be sold into slavery. Elijah comes and says, "What do you got?" "I got a little bit of oil." "Well, go borrow some jars from your friends." She goes to the neighbor's house, gets a bunch of jars, pours the oil out into the jar she has into all the other ones, and has enough oil to pay off her debt and live on. God supplied all this oil for her. And this is almost like the miracle of the fish and the loaves. So we all know that God can supply as much oil or anything else as we need. And this is in the spirit of what Hanukkah is celebrating. Say Happy Hanukkah on a Hanukkah day if you're a store. I mean, my gosh, that's not good. If you're a Christian and Happy Hanukkah bothers you, you need to take a hard look at your heart. And because Hanukkah is celebrating the provision of God. Now, here what you have people who are celebrating Hanukkah, they know of God's power and celebrate it, but they don't know about Jesus. Go and take that message to them. That's what we need to focus on. Not feeling, "Oh, they're being too PC." I don't mind hearing Happy Hanukkah, and I hope you don't. Now, after all this, we're talking about how Christmas was basically a made-up holiday by the Pope sometime in ancient Rome. Well, should we cancel it? No, because I want my presents. I'm just joking around, but there's nothing wrong with celebrating Christmas. Nothing. It's great to celebrate Christmas. I love to get together with my family at Christmas time. It's wonderful, and it's nice to affirm once a year on his birthday that Jesus came for us. Now, like I said, Jesus was born in spring, but we celebrate George Washington's birthday on President's Day. He really wasn't born that day, so I guess we can celebrate Jesus' birthday on December 25th, even if he wasn't born there. Should we stop buying presents? No. There's nothing wrong giving presents to your family members or anybody. Just don't neglect giving to God the first fruits. Always give to God first. If you give some cheap Christmas presents to somebody, like, "You only spent $10 on me this year," like, "Well, I couldn't afford to tithe and give you a Christmas present." What's that person going to say? So let's not cancel Christmas, and let's not cancel Santa. Santa gets criticism. People are like, "Oh, well, you tell a kid about Santa, and then he finds out Santa's not real. Well, he'll just think when you told him of God, he's making that up too." Well, that didn't happen to me. I got saved when I was 6. I don't think I still believed in Santa, and I didn't really believe in Santa like I believed in God. Like, oh, this magical guy on reindeer sleighs flying through the air with a bunch of elves brings me presents that I saw at Toys R Us yesterday. I'm going to believe in that as long as people keep giving me presents. You know, Santa in no way ever weakened my faith in God. And Santa's a great theological example. Santa gives you presents only if you're good. If you're not good, you don't get any presents. God gave us Jesus because we weren't good and we needed him. And we don't have to do any good works at all to be saved. And that's what it tells us in Ephesians, I believe, is that we're saved by faith. And we shouldn't boast in anything but our faith in the Lord. So when you tell your kid, "Listen, Santa's a magical guy who flies through the air," you only get a present if you're good. Jesus Christ came to be good for you. So you can use Santa to teach a theological lesson. So basically my whole point in all this, I hope you don't think I'm deriding Christmas, because I love Christmas. Ask somebody in my family. I wake everybody up at 6 o'clock in the morning. We got to open presents. We got to open presents. I love getting presents for people. That's why I buy my presents so early. So I got a present for somebody and I can put it under the tree and I got them this present. I love giving presents to my family. And even more than getting them, if you'll believe that. Christmas is wonderful. Let's not cancel it, but let's put it in perspective. I just want to basically say this. Get as upset as you do when you hear happy holidays the next time you learn somebody is lost. And that's the basic point. Happy holiday season's greetings. I don't like listening to that stuff either. I like to hear Merry Christmas. And one day, when Jesus comes back in the New Jerusalem, when we don't need the sun anymore, because Jesus is the Son, there'll be no one who's offended by the name of Jesus. And every knee shall bow and say, Jesus Christ is Lord.